Hello there, and thank you for joining me again today on Geezers of Gear, episode number 220. A great podcast today. I will tell you more about it in a little bit, but for now, today's podcast is brought to you by ACT Entertainment. Nearly every project brings unique constraints and criteria for lighting control. There's always a request for integration with other systems, and everything needs to be smart and easy to use and maintain. Not a simple task, even on the largest projects. That's why ACT Entertainment is thrilled to be distributing the Visual Productions line of incredible control products. Designed for continuous and reliable deployment in installations as well as live events, these versatile and easy-to-use devices deliver on the promise of complete project integration on budget. If you are obsessive about control, the Visual Productions lineup was made just for you. Learn more by visiting actentertainment.com. And today's podcast is also brought to you by a company I know a little bit about, GearSource. GearSource was founded in 2002 with a mission to help global events businesses to move gear around the planet. Since that time, the company has transacted in more than 100 countries and has sold $250 million in sound, lighting, staging, and video gear. I remember almost every one of those transactions. Now, GearSource has completely evolved its platform for massive global growth, enabling 14 different localized currencies, payments held in escrow to protect buyers and sellers, an AI-powered logistics back-end system behind a new global logistics brand called Gear Moves, and so much more. Visit gearsource.com today and expand your access to global markets for your gear and global gear for your markets. Did you hear that podcast, episode number 219, the last one, the previous one, with Jamie Martis from Coffee Cult? And, I talk about it all the time, Geezer's Grind from Coffee Cult, which is my daily drink, and so many other people in the industry, and goes to support Roby Backstage and helping people who need the help in our industry. But great story. If you haven't heard it, please go listen to 219. Jamie's a good guy. He comes from our industry, longtime roadie, lighting guy, etc. Had his own company, still does actually, in live events. He had a generator company, he had a lighting company, he's had several businesses, staging, and he's always done really well, but he's super passionate about coffee, knows a lot about it, taught us a lot about it on the podcast. So go listen to 219. It's a good one. But I'm really, really excited about today. I am a business geek. I'm an entrepreneur geek. I love the tech. I love systems and processes and things that make businesses better. I constantly read books about it. I'm constantly following different podcasts. And this gentleman happens to be one of those podcasts that I do follow. So Tom Stimson is a business advisor, coach, speaker, and works exclusively with hands-on owners and management teams who want to improve their decision-making and elevate their strategic thinking. His intentional success framework has helped hundreds of companies remove the clutter of past decisions and focus on better goals with resolute efficiency. All of that stuff is amazing. I just basically read his bio information, but the guy is just a really smart dude. He's great to listen to. Really do check out his podcast, which I believe is called the same thing as his coaching business, which is Intentional Success. Tom Stimson, Intentional Success. I know you can just search for it on Apple or any of the podcast mediums, and you'll find it. I listened to a couple of them on my walk this morning. They're all pretty short episodes, really easy to listen to. Anyways, without further ado, Mr. Tom Stimson. Hi, Tom.
Hey, how's it going?
Fan-flippin-tastic. Couldn't be better. It's funny because the biggest AV expert that we've ever had on this podcast, I think, had the most trouble getting on the podcast. So he's on like camera 7 now.
Yeah,
He has.
yeah. I'm wildly engineered here, so
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm not used to even having guests on that have headphones on. It's a struggle just to get them to use like an AirPod, So yeah, as you
right.
probably know.
Yeah. Yes, as I have experienced many times.
Yes. I mean, it's crazy because I'm always looking for better microphones, better mixing boards, better audio. yet I'm at the mercy of my guests. So,
I will tell you, AV people are really the worst at this, and back when I was out in the field visiting companies all the time, you go in their conference room, big integration company, they could never get their conference room to work, stall living, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then I couldn't get any of my clients to use Zoom before
Oh, really?
I'd book a Zoom meeting and they'd call in on their phone. I mean, they wouldn't touch the thing.
So I really want to get into a lot of things with you today. I've had this one circled on my calendar for a couple of weeks now because I really am a business geek. But first, I like to start with every single guest we have on just sort of what your background is, the foundation that got you to where we're at today. And then we're going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about where you're at today. So, how'd you get started? I know you started more like on the AV show side of things, right?
Well, I mean, I'm a failed theater kid, right? So I mean, I actually grew up doing theater and doing so. When I finally got out of college and stopped working in the roadhouse, went to go find real work. What I found was I could work in theater and make nothing. Or then I answered an ad back then, we had newspapers back then
Yeah.
for projectionists. I was like, well, I do big deal. And I found an AV company. I didn't know what AV companies were. I knew what AV was because we did it in the convention, big university center, but I didn't think it was an industry.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, we'll pay you $10 an hour. This is 1983. We'll pay you, which is good money for a freelancer back then. It's like, we'll pay you $10 an hour if you'll come babysit slide projectors and run, Shure microphones through M68 mixers into house sound. I was going, well, this is not rocket science. Oh, but you have to wear a suit and we need you to shave your beard. Oh man, this is not working out for me. But yeah. So, yeah, I still owned a suit and I shaved my beard and found myself working in hotels and they fed you and, you're working inside. It's easy. And then, it's like, how do I get more work? Well, we only have, you're the only freelancer we know. We just hire you when we have a one-person gig. I said, what do you do when you have a five-person gig? Well, we call the union, but they hate doing our jobs. So I said, okay, well, what if I find some more freelancers? So I started a staffing company. I mean, it's
Interesting.
like,
How old
it's
were you
just,
then when you
yeah,
started
it's
the
just
staffing company? That was a while ago still too, right?
uh, 2022. I was
Oh,
probably 22
wow.
years old. 22, 20.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So,
You were
yeah,
thinking big.
just trained people. I did gigs and got more gigs, but I ended up, anybody that came from out of town into the Dallas Fort Worth area, we were the local labor people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's interesting. And then so from there uh I think you got into Alfred Media at some point, right?
yeah, I mean, they were one of my clients, and while I had the staffing company, I had business agents who ran it, and they did
Okay.
most of the day to day and filled most of the gigs. And I went off and I was traveling and doing shows, right? So I had my clients, and I would go doing my gigs. And the guys from Alford, were at a company before that called Kimball AV, and so we'd worked together for years. We did the Coca-Cola 100th anniversary in 19 with 72 slide projectors. We were the slide
Wow.
guys. And when they started, the current iteration of Alford Media in 1990, I started January of 91.
Okay.
And they finally figured out that, hey, I went out and did shows, but I was the person who made the show, made the stuff work. I wasn't a great technical crew chief, right?
Yeah.
So they got organizational skills. Would you come in and run us? And so Tom did most of sales. I did sales. I created the operations. We did anytime there was a process missing, I'm a process guy. So I'd make a process. And being a theater person where we have processes that are, a millennia old, it
Yeah.
was not hard to find better practices than what we were doing. Right. So
Well, Alfred was much smaller back then, I'm assuming. Like,
it was a startup. I mean,
oh,
it
okay.
was, I mean, I was probably employee number 6 on the
Oh,
rental
wow.
side.
Hmm.
and the other three people were named Alford. So,
That's wild.
and the and it was their first year of business, and they went from like 6 employees in beginning of '91. I think we had 80 in 2000.
Damn.
So they went from $1 million company to a $20 million company in 8 years. It was a wild, wild. The '90s were something to behold.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where you really discovered most of what you teach today, too, though, or at least a foundation of it
Yeah,
all is,
yeah,
there's nothing like growth to teach you a lot of stuff, especially that kind of
right,
growth, right?
right. Yeah, it is. It's very foundational. Lots of things that I learned then that still apply. The big thing is the mindset.
Yeah.
Understanding how to constantly exceed what you perceive your capacity to be.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
impossible to grow if you think you're only this big. And the cool thing about the Alford culture is we were used to being the underdog. We started out as the underdog. We were competing against big East Coast and West Coast big name players.
We're using the dumbest technology we have, and we're just sticking with it.
All right. It's working now, Tom. I can hear you. I can see you.
Okay.
There you are. Sorry about all of this. I don't know what's going on. This has
Well,
honestly never happened. It's bizarre.
that makes me feel so special.
Yeah, well, I wanted you to feel special here today. You're on Geezers
Yeah.
of Gear, and we're geezers, and so here we
Where
are.
is it?
We could use some gear, apparently.
Yeah.
So, anyways, you were talking about Alford and how you were there for sort of the blitz scaling that they went through
Yeah.
when they went from $1 million to $20 million, which to me, those are two entirely different companies. A company
Yeah.
doing $1 million in revenue versus 20 million is night
Yeah.
and
I would
day.
say it was five different companies.
Yeah, yeah,
It was, five different iterations, going from 1 million to 5 million was a company, going from 5 to 10 was a company, 10 to 15.
yeah,
There's a point in time where we had three offices. We had an office in Atlanta and LA as well.
yeah.
I mean, so, there was two new, I mean, it was just every year it was like, the bar just got raised and we figured it out. Um,
Tom, in that there's a lesson though, because it's funny. I had, I operate a marketplace company, and I had a startup marketplace founder contact me a couple of weeks ago, and because I'm sort of an OG of marketplace, I've been in the
mhm,
marketplace world since before it was called a marketplace,
mhm,
and so I get these people reach out to me all the time. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And so I asked him where he was getting all of his ideas from, because I said, these are big ideas. Like, you're a startup. You haven't even really got product market fit yet. You haven't hit your first, 100,000 in revenue yet, let alone 1 million. And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm reading every Amazon book and listening to every Jeff Bezos podcast that I can, and I'm
right,
just duplicating what he does." And I said, "You realize that a $1 trillion company functions a little
right,
differently than a
right,
$0 company."
right.
And you might want to back that up a little bit. Like, there's some good principles you'll be able to find in there, but you need to understand that hiring a person into a one employee company is very different than hiring a person into a 100,000 employee company or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah, it's nice to have aspirations, but we first have to have some sales.
of course, yeah,
And
yeah,
if you don't have, if you're not, and to have sales, you have to have a product or service. So I mean, there's so many things. It's like, yeah, that would be really cool,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But there aren't that many Jeff Bezos out there,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I don't want to go too far off your story here, but I was listening to one of your podcasts this morning, and you were talking about how when you first start out with a new client, and you sort of have a checklist that you go through,
Mhm.
and see, in my brain, I would always start with revenue. What's your revenue look like? And you said, no, you want to end up at revenue, because otherwise, if you don't know how the revenue happened, you're not going to know whether there's problems in there or whatever, right?
Right, right. Yeah, when you're talking to a new prospect, and all consultants, all solo entrepreneurs, all freelancers, we have a certain complex where we think we're not worthy enough, right?
Yeah.
So if you ask them about the show and you go, "Oh my God, that's the biggest show I've ever," all of a sudden you've talked yourself out of being qualified.
Right.
So part
Right.
of this goes back to the psychology of being a consultant. It's like, hey, I've never done business with a $500 million company. So if they tell me they're a $500 million company, I'm not thinking I have any solutions. But I tell you what, I've worked with $500 million companies. They're just as messed up as $5 million
Of
companies.
course there.
It just has a bigger ramification.
Well,
So
yeah.
you start with, how do you feel about things? Are you comfortable with what you're doing? And if you're already getting issues there, there's plenty of stuff to do.
Oh God, we have the Mac celebrations happening right now on the
Yeah.
screen. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
PC
it's like
people everywhere are watching this on YouTube and cringing right now.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, well, okay, that's why I don't watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's
Hilarious.
like, yeah, let's start with, something that matters and, let's figure out how do you feel about it and, how confident are you in your people and do you like your customers,
Yeah.
right? And then you kind of get to, do you have any idea what business you're actually in? And then, okay,
Yeah.
tell me about how much money you do and how much money you're making.
It makes a lot of sense. You know, again, I've always sort of come from the sales angle, and for me, sales solves everything and sales solves all the problems and all of that stuff. But the thing is, it makes a lot of sense taking sales out of the equation and getting down to sort of first
Right.
principle thinking or whatever you want to call it, right?
All of our problems start with sales.
True.
Right? So that's right. So, there's a lot of $10 million companies out there that are not making money. Everything they do is hard. They don't like all of their customers. They would be a wildly profitable $6 million company and love their life,
Yeah. Yeah.
except for sales.
Yeah. By the way, I've done that mistake on my own. Like I had a
Yeah.
wildly profitable in a different business. I had a wildly profitable $7 or $8 million business that, the whole world told me you can turn this into $100 million company very quickly. You just have to do this and this and this. And the worst thing that happened was an investor came along and threw a bunch of money at me to do that
Hmm.
and just completely destroyed my business. And
Yeah.
so I learned a valuable lesson. I mean, yeah, you know,
Yeah. I think it was Tom Alford. I mean, he had a flaw. He says anybody can sell.
yeah.
Revenue is not hard to get, right? So revenue can't be the goal. It's got to be the right revenue.
Well, yeah. I mean, says the guy with a lot of revenue. Sometimes revenue is really hard to get, and I know, like in marketplaces in particular, and you and I could have an offline conversation about this one day, but marketplaces are very unique businesses because you have the supply side and the demand side, and
Right?
sometimes you have three sides. Like in a
Hmm.
like one of these DoorDash companies or something, you have the driver, the food company, and the customer. So you have a three-sided marketplace, and then the marketplace. So in a sense, it's even a four-sided marketplace. But you know, when you start up a marketplace, you have to basically make a very early decision on which side you're going to focus on, the supply side or the demand side. And of course, it's hard to create demand with no supply. It's hard to create supply with no demand. And they call that the cold start problem.
Hmm.
And it's something that I was fortunate I didn't have to learn much about because my supply and demand side are the same people. And so as soon as you added two people, you basically had a network, and network effects started happening. When you added a third person, network effects started happening.
Hmm.
And so I love the marketplace business, but it's one of the hardest businesses in the world. It really is. And that's why sometimes I say that finding revenue isn't the easiest thing. Um, you know, I'll give you a quick example, Tom. Sorry to talk so much, but COVID happened.
Hmm.
Most businesses shut down completely. And we had this weird situation where we got a lot of supply all of a sudden because
Hmm.
companies, and you actually wrote a really great article about it. I'll give you credit for some of this because I helped share your article. It was something like, your greatest asset is in your warehouse or something like that.
Right.
And I pushed that around like crazy. And companies literally were using
Hmm.
inventory as currency, to
Yes.
pay their rent and to pay their
Hmm.
employees or whatever. And so we had a lot of sellers and very few buyers, really like bottom feeder sort of opportunist buyers
Right.
who were sitting on a lot of cash and went, yeah, I'll buy 20 of those. I'll need them eventually, you know?
Hmm.
And then 2021 happened, and all of a sudden it just
It
completely flipped the script, and we had no supply and a
right.
shit ton of demand that we couldn't fill.
Right.
So,
And then 2022, the supply chain is shut down, so you can't buy
well,
new products. So
yeah.
all of a sudden, used product is
And
very
then
valuable.
2023, manufacturers overbuilt everything and were not only dropping prices, they were financing it. They were so aggressive. So now we had supply ish and
Mhm.
very little demand because now all of a sudden new prices were less than used prices in many cases. So
Mhm.
it's been a weird and wacky world that I live in for
Mhm.
sure because and we'll get into that later. But anyways, Alfred Media.
Yeah, I'm saying, but what you're talking about really sounds like fun, and there's a lot of parallels to that go-go 90s experience I talk about,
Yeah.
where if you figure out what the knobs of your business are, or faders, if that's the way you
Yeah.
go,
Yeah. I
you
was
know
going to
what
say
to
I'm the
push
knob
when.
of my business.
Yeah.
I'm just a big knob at the end of the day. So,
Right. So, and there, of course, is like, okay, how much of you can we turn up and turn down?
yeah.
But what we want to do is we want to get a little parametric on you and
Mm,
have more versions of that so that we can
right. Of
dial
course.
those things in.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for businesses that are evolving, growing, expanding, whatever it might be. Because I mean, people generally want to grow. I deal with owners who are happy where they're at, just want to make it better,
Yeah.
but most of them aspire to something else. And of course, you have to grow with the market too, right?
Yeah.
$2 million now is not what $2 million was 10 years ago.
True. Yeah.
So you should be a $4 million company. So
Well, and that
knowing
even
which knobs to turn is important.
that what you just said, 2 million today is different than 2 million a long time ago, brings up 1,000 other questions. So I want to get through your foundational story first. So you spent roughly 15 years at Alford, learned an awful lot. I assume
Mhm.
you learned a ton about, like, I think if I were to guess, your next stage in business where you got into consulting and stuff was really created by going through that, 1 to 5 million, 5 to 10 million, 10 to 20 million at Alford. Uh,
Right.
would be my guess. Like because you
Yeah.
learned every business model in doing that, right?
We learned every business model, and I was involved in so many aspects of the business. From the finance side, the capex side, the IT side. We had our own software platform.
Mm,
So I was touching a lot of things. You know, my style is I like to learn something. I need to understand it well enough to delegate it.
yeah, yeah, that makes
And so
sense.
when I could delegate it, then I can just touch base with that person or that team to understand what's going on.
Yeah,
When other teams, when things are changing and we need to go back and get this thing to change, if we need to bring our platform, our software platform has to evolve. Well, that's because of changes in sales, changes in
right,
operations, changes in warehouse, changes in finance. Now we go back to software development and meet their needs.
right.
So that's a great learning experience. But there you get to a point in time in one's career when you've run out of things to do. You know, I was very fortunate. We had a fantastic team.
Yeah.
By the time I realized it was time for me to move on, I also realized that in probably less than a year, I spent about 3 years winding down, but in less than a year, I had delegated 90% of what I did,
Wow. Hmm.
right? So that when it came time to exit, it wasn't a huge transition.
You rendered
We,
yourself redundant.
I did, and which is something, which is a lesson from my father. I watched
Yeah,
my father
yeah,
and his career as a business executive moving from company to company, and he would get promotions, and we'd get to go out to a fancy dinner, and we'd get a promotion, we'd go to a nicer dinner. That's the only thing that changed in our life is we got to go out to eat. But
yeah.
I asked him once what he's doing. He says whenever he took on a new role, he worked himself out of the job.
That's an
He tried to
interesting
make
concept.
that management role, that director role, that vice president role obsolete to
That's an
free
interesting
himself
concept.
up to go on to the next thing because there were people who needed to be empowered. There were processes that needed to be put in place. The only reason you have this organizational man there is because we didn't take the time to develop the people and processes so that we don't need that person.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, again, it brings up 1,000 different questions, but so in roughly 2006, you left. You that again, all of those lessons
Right.
and education and everything became the foundation that created a consulting business. I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
That
is
was the toolbox that I started with.
yeah, which is pretty much where you continue today, and you've added all kinds of different wrinkles onto it. And I think you've written a book, Balance,
Yeah. I've
how to
got
build a
a couple
scalable
books.
business with less stress and more profit. And
Yeah.
I got to go get that book myself because I got to figure that one out. You know,
It is balance. I mean, balance is kind of like is taking everything that I've learned over the 40 years and distilling it down to what I consider my operating system now.
yeah.
And this book couldn't have happened without the pandemic,
Oh, really?
because the pandemic taught us what we needed to understand. Before the pandemic, particularly in the live event production rental industry, we had an entire industry which one not scalable at all.
Yeah,
A seasonal industry that isn't scalable. It's insane. So everybody was focused on job costs. How can I reduce the cost on this job and make this job more profitable, rather than how can I make the business more profitable? So they hire more technicians and they buy more gear to reduce their outsourcing and their subrental, so they can say yes to one more job on the off chance that somebody wants to hire them.
yeah,
And then in the months when they're slow, they go, oh well, we were busy cleaning up the warehouse and doing deep QC on the gear and trying to justify all their expenses. And go, this is totally untenable.
yeah.
And the
So
pandemic
true.
hit, knocked all of that revenue away. And I had clients that went from 60 employees to 5 employees.
Yeah,
But within a year, they were doing half the revenue again, because now they're doing streaming events. They're outsourcing everything because they're scared to death to hire anyone. Thank
yeah.
goodness. Right. And then we start to see, okay, here's the problem we have.
That
We're
was some of the
overbilled for
positive
what we
changes.
do.
That was some of the
Yeah.
positive. So I won't say who the owner was, but I helped an owner sell his company, and relatively a very experienced company. I think they'd been around for around 40 years, and this owner sat down with me. This was right at I'd say early 21 when he was getting ready to close on the deal to sell his company. And him and I went to dinner, and he said, Marcel, you're helping me in so many ways right now, and I really appreciate it and all this stuff. But he said, some people don't understand something. And I said, what? And he said, the pandemic was a really good thing. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, and for me, I have some very good answers to that, by the way, because I think it was a great thing for most of our
Mm.
industry, as hard as it was. But
Right.
he said, there's a lot of people that I had to lay off that I, in a million years, never would have let go. And now I'm not hiring them back.
Yeah.
And so he said it allowed me basically to clean house. And it's such an important thing because, there is so much dead weight that was sort of hovering around our industry, whether it's on the manufacturer side or the rental
Hmm.
companies or everywhere. I mean, just all over the place. There's people who are lifers who really think I've kind of earned my chops and I don't really need to do it anymore, or I don't need to do as much anymore. I don't need to be as
Hmm.
functional as I once was or whatever because now I'm a veteran. And I mean, I think at my age, I still have to hustle just as much as I did 30 years
Right.
ago, or else I'm going to find myself less valuable.
Right. And if your heroes, because you're talking about the heroes, the people
Yeah.
you've kept around because they save the day once, every once in a while they save the day, so they're protected, they're franchise players, right? But whenever there's a problem, which usually is because they didn't solve it,
Yeah.
their solution is we need more people.
Yeah.
We don't have enough people. That's their solution to everything. Well, we need to hire more people. Oh, these guys aren't good enough. We need to hire better people, instead
Yeah.
of getting
So
down to
true.
what the crux to the problem is.
Yeah. So true. I don't know what just
So it's
happened there.
like,
I hit my bubble thing and it grew. Oops. Yeah, no, you're completely right, and
yeah.
I mean, so what were some of the other things that you think COVID did to really help our industry? There's a few things that it did, obviously, to hurt our industry. It
The,
it
the
hurt.
most The
it hurt
most
companies.
important thing.
It hurt companies' P&Ls. It hurt companies' balance sheets a little bit. Way too much
Yeah.
debt. Companies brought on way too much debt because it suddenly became easy to get and cheaper than it was. But now that they're paying it back, they're going, "Ooh, geez, maybe I shouldn't have taken all that money." But
You know, the thing that, and it wasn't just the pandemic on our industry, it really was on the entire economy, changed the value of people. Okay, so we had all these people leave the marketplace involuntarily. I'm sorry for everybody who lost their job, who struggled and did all of that. It wasn't good that happened to them.
yeah,
What's good is that we started to pay better attention to what people are worth, and people didn't come back to work unless you paid them more money, valued them more,
that's true.
gave them the right responsibilities. Freelancers left the marketplace because, well, one, we weren't paying them enough anyway. We were paying them less than what we sold, and we sold it for too little.
Yeah,
Right. So I was like, I take people all the time and said, like, you've got an audio engineer on your team that's making $100,000 a year and you're charging $600 a day for him.
yeah.
Do the math for me, right? How many
Make
days a
this
year
make
does that person
sense.
have to work to pay for themselves? So it's like we completely misconstrued the value of labor, and the pandemic was a reset for us.
Yeah,
And so now we've got labor rates up to probably where they should be. It was a huge, painful jump for a lot of buyers, but we also lost a lot of buyers, which is another great thing because all the price shoppers got fired because there was nothing for them to buy.
uh,
And then they didn't get hired back. They put a younger person in their place who was more interested in relationships than being the hero for beating up a supplier.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so our buyers have changed. So now we can have value conversations instead of, well, let's just compare prices. Well, these other guys will do it for this, or they're cheaper on this than you are. Can you match their price on this one line item? And then they do it to you 50 times. So we got out of price shopping situations because during the pandemic, if you could do a streaming event and you were available, you got hired.
Yeah.
They say, I don't care what you charge me, I have to do this thing. And then during 2022, during the supply chain shortage, at the same time, we're having revenge meetings because now we're back in ballrooms. Again, it was like the first question you ask is, are you guys even available? Okay, if you're available, great. What is it going to cost me to do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so now you're setting your own price. Well, man, it's hard to go, that 25% net profit that people were making in 22, it's hard to give that up and go back to that 4% net profit you were making in 2019.
So true. Yeah. So true. So, like going into COVID, early in COVID,
Mm, mm,
there were a bunch in my own head. There were a bunch of myths, like this
mm,
is going to happen. This is going to happen. And I'll tell you, two of my biggest ones were this concept that I used to call day 91. I said, this is a 90-day problem. And you want to basically take this time to clean your shop, clean yourself, clean your
mm-hmm.
skills, upskill a little bit if you can.
Right.
And you want to improve the outlook for day 91. I just came up with this whole concept of day 91. And so that was one of the things that I screwed up badly, and I was way wrong. It was like day, 591 or something.
Right.
And the other one was that I thought the people who were going to hurt the most, or the companies that were going to hurt the most, were the manufacturers. And because I'm in a different part of the business technically than you are, you're more on the
Mm-hmm.
AV side. I'm talking primarily like the large automated lighting
Right.
manufacturers, for example. I felt like there was going to be some, some attrition and some roll ups, and some brands were going to go away. Like if you started with 20 brands, you were going to end up with 10. And God, was I wrong? I mean, they're all
Yeah.
bigger today than they were pre-pandemic by a long shot. They're
Mm-hmm.
all hitting record sales every month by a long
Mm-hmm.
shot. And what were some of the ones that you sort of fumbled on?
In the early days, everybody thought that lots and lots of companies were going to go out of business. Once we got past that idea that this is only going to last 90 days,
Yeah,
right? People go, man, so many companies are going to go under. It's like, no. I mean, I personally talked to 5 owners who said, you know what, I'm just going to hang it up. I'm almost 70. I should have sold the company years ago. I'm just going to liquidate and move on.
Yeah.
That could happen on any year. The fact
Yeah.
is,
True.
between the government subsidies that were available and the fact that if you got rid of your overhead, okay, we had a lot of runway to work
Yeah.
with. So the people who pivoted more quickly and got into virtual and found other ways to be valuable and reduce their overhead actually did okay, which is most companies. One business owner that I was working with right at the beginning of pandemic, is 100% of my business went away, right?
Yeah.
And we were going through a big change management project, so he could sell his company down the road. And he called me up and says, "I'm just going to shut it down." He laid off he had like 40, 50 employees. He laid off all of them. He kept two on retainer, one of them which was a relative, right?
Yeah.
And if the phone rang, he answered it, and if he felt like doing it, he did it.
Hmm.
He says, "I'm going to shut down for at least a year and see where we're at, and then hire back." So there were lots of different reactions, but we really didn't lose anyone.
Yeah.
We got people thinking about their business differently.
Yeah. True.
But
Hmm.
your 90-day thing, it's like you were forward thinking. There was a lot of people who thought this was going to last 4 weeks,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
right?
I
That
didn't.
I had a webinar. I think it was March 17th or 18th, and I realized that, wait a minute, I can't do a webinar on what I was going to do about it. I got to talk about this.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What's going on here? Because we are now 4 weeks into cancellations. The wheels had fallen off the wagon. So I got on there and I started doing these weekly webinars about how to respond to this. And on that webinar, I started up and said, "Guys, here's the situation we're in. You are not going to have any revenue before next August. Zero, none. Start planning that now." Yeah, if you want to hang on to people and clean the warehouse and do the inventory, you can. I am telling you right now, you're not going to have any revenue. By week 3 of those webinars, I was telling them you're not going to have normal revenue again until 2023.
Damn, you were very on
Because
top of it. Much
I
more
said
so than me.
it
Much more
became
so than
very
me.
clear that we were going to have vaccines, all these things that were going to happen that's going on. We're not going back in the ballroom for a really, really long time. You better embrace virtual events. You better figure out how to do it, because that's where demand is.
Yeah.
At that time, it was now it's May of 2020, and the big business was outdoor graduations.
Yeah.
Where the parents drive the kid up in the car and they hand them the diploma through the car window. They're
Yes.
doing them in drive-in
Terrible.
theaters.
Ugh.
It's
Yeah.
like
Terrible.
that was our big business, for that month. But then
Yeah.
we still had to communicate. We still had to talk to people,
Yeah. Well,
and streaming events.
again, different for the AV side of the business than for the, call it, rock and roll or
Entertainment.
live event entertainment side of the business, because they tried to do virtual events and there were a
Yeah,
few that worked out okay, but for the most part, like, virtual concerts sucked.
right,
Drive-in concerts sucked.
right.
And they weren't very profitable for anybody involved, the
No.
artist, the production company, the promoter, anybody. Nobody could make any money with these pods that were 10 feet apart with 4 people in each pod or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Those
ridiculous.
pictures of those outdoor things where they've got these 12 by 12
Oh, I know, so
squares with 4
crazy.
people in it. It's like,
So
oh,
crazy. Yeah, I mean, again, how do you make money on that? Like, the logistics. And I remember one of these outdoor concerts, and all these, they showed renderings of it. Look at all these people in their cars, and they can listen to the concert and stick their head out the window and cheer and stuff.
yeah,
And I said, where do they go to the bathroom?
yeah,
And they just went dead silent. They were like, they didn't
yeah,
even think about, how are these people, like, what do they pee in a bottle in their car or
right,
something?
right.
Like, how do they go to the bathroom? And yeah, that hadn't been considered at the time.
Yeah,
So
and entertainment was tough. Touring, obviously. I mean, there's
yeah, brutal.
that was probably the most difficult thing to get back into a
Yeah,
viable model. But the interesting thing is, as a modest consumer of music, the number of artists who were able to find a following by embracing virtual
true.
and doing their own mini concerts. There's a lot of
Yeah,
people that I still follow that I only found out about because they had the presence of mind to get
yeah,
out in the world and expose themselves. And then when things came back, they're out touring, and comedians.
yeah.
One
Comedians
of the
did very
comedian
well. Yeah.
They did really well because
Yeah.
they could do that virtually. So
Although I listened to a few of them like on Joe Rogan and stuff, and they said that was hard. Because
yeah,
comedians are funny because of the interaction
the
with the
audience.
audience.
Yeah,
The audience is what makes them vibe and makes them funny and
right.
stuff. And I saw some artists say the same thing. Like, Metallica did a virtual thing where they had like that Tony Robbins 360 screen
Right.
around them, and they could point and go, "Bob in Kentucky, let's rock," and Bob would be like,
Yeah.
"Yeah," on the screen.
Yeah.
And they had, I think you paid extra to be part of the VIP group that was the 2,000 people on the screen or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was one of the few that I saw that worked well. But when you heard interviews from the band, they said it was so hard. We're a
Yeah.
metal band, and to
Right.
stand in a room in a round screen and try and make it
Right.
seem like we're having a good
Well,
time, it's hard.
and there was a lot. I mean, there was obviously a lot of social pushback. I mean, yes, we're an event industry, live event. People have to be there. That's what makes it a live event. And
Yeah.
you know, we can't have lockdowns. We can't have social. We can't have all of these things. It's more important for people to get together, which was part of the problem.
Right. Exactly.
Right? It's like
Exactly.
say,
Yeah.
man, the quicker you embrace the solution, the sooner we're going to get back to the thing that's important to you. So that's the thing that, talking to my audience is getting them to, guys, process this,
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
this through, right? Okay. Yes, you may be in a market where people are comfortable out and going meetings. I live in a major city. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're putting a
True.
hazmat suit on to go to the grocery store until
Yeah.
we understood what was going on. So, like I said, it was an opportunity to start to understand some things that
Yeah.
what's valuable in what you do. And what's valuable in what you do is not own equipment and have technicians at your beck and call. What's valuable is you get a show done for your customer.
Yeah.
And my
Absolutely.
message was a virtual meeting is a show.
Yeah.
Get over it. It's a show.
Yeah.
You can treat it like a Zoom meeting, okay, in which case it's going to suck. Or
Yeah.
you can treat it like a show. Now, what are you going to do about it? How do you make this a show?
Huh. And some people probably did it really, really well, and others
Yeah.
didn't, I would guess, right?
They created their own platforms. We had people developing
Yeah,
software,
I saw some of that stuff.
to create virtual environments. And
Yeah.
you walk out and you're standing in a lobby and you choose the meeting room you go to next, and you
Yeah.
interactive. There's huge things that were developed.
Tom,
They're all
though,
sitting dormant now,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
they were extremely valuable for a
Well,
long
but
time.
one of the things that I thought was so cool during the pandemic was it made me proud of the industry that we're in, because there was so much innovation, because
Mhm.
people refused and hated just sitting back watching Netflix and stuff and just accepting we're closed, So
Mhm.
like I did that whole red alert restart thing with a group of people that we pulled together
Mhm.
and lit up 3,000 some odd buildings across the country and stuff. People were so happy to go out and hang lights, and
Mhm.
program lights and hit buttons and stuff. Like they
Yeah.
were just so excited to do that. But, the other really positive thing I think that came from COVID in the entertainment space is the pent up demand created such an explosion of growth in the
Mhm.
market, and an explosion of demand for live events and live music, that you have every average or better artist playing in stadiums. You have
Mhm.
comedians playing in stadiums, 50, 60,000 seat stadiums,
Mhm.
and it ain't getting any smaller. It isn't slowing down. One of the things that, and I keep quoting this on my podcast, but Rapino from Live Nation said in their, I think it was their quarterly earnings report or
Mhm.
something, he said that growth is going to continue in 2024. And here's why. These artists have like 10 million followers on their platforms, and my job's easy. I have to sell 500,000 tickets out of 10 million followers. I have a
Yeah.
really easy job. So the artists, the promoters, everybody's looking to expand that from 5% to
Well,
10 or 15% of their followers, right?
right. But they didn't have those followers before the
Correct.
pandemic.
Yeah. A lot
The
of that grew
pandemic
during the
is
pandemic.
what got them those followers because they
Totally
had
true.
to adapt, right? one day we're gonna call it. They had to Taylor Swift it, right?
Yeah.
So they Swifted an audience together, and that's what fills their stadium. Back in the day, we did concerts to sell records,
Hmm.
then we did records to sell
Of
concerts.
course. Yeah.
Now we build social networks,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
can sell anything we want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy though. I mean, to me, that's one of the craziest things that's come out of COVID is the amount of demand and growth in the, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see
Yeah.
the live music, live event, entertainment space growing as much as it is. And I know uh, the AV side of the business, conference, conventions, corporate meetings and stuff is still coming back. Like it hasn't had the explosive growth from what I understand anyways.
Oh, I'm not sure I agree with that. I
Oh,
think it
really?
has had very explosive growth.
Huh. Yeah, because
Yeah.
most of the companies that I talk to say that it's still coming back. Basically, like a lot of the massive stuff that they used to do is still coming back. Because there are companies that late into even 23 were uncomfortable putting 5,000 of their staff in a ballroom or whatever. Um,
Yeah, so there are types of events that have not come back, but they've been replaced by three other events.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Right. So I mean, the surge of work that we saw in 2022 revenue far exceeded 2019, 23 exceeded 2019, though it didn't exceed 2022.
yeah,
Because remember, 2022, we had pent up demand. It was wild, wild west. Prices were through the roof. 2023 is pretty darn normal. It was way better than 2019,
yeah,
much more profitable, right? And 2024 is even more normal in that our lead times have gotten longer.
yeah,
So big events are definitely back. Small events are bigger because we're
yeah,
pricing them correctly,
yeah,
right? And the difference between, in 2019, the difference between a good company and somebody who was a poser, their difference in price was 5%.
mm,
The difference in price between those two companies now is 30%.
really,
Yeah.
that's massive.
There's there's tons of posers out there still.
Yeah,
Those are the people who have the same revenue or less than they had before and are telling you that meetings aren't coming back
yeah,
because they're the same company they were before,
right, yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
probably not all of them, but typically when I find somebody who has not seen the upside of the post-pandemic era, it's
yeah.
because they're the same company they were before.
What about so as a consultant, business coach, et cetera, are you dealing with a lot of the downside of that explosive growth in, mental health, physical health? I know people who have literally worked themselves to death
Yeah,
since the pandemic where,
yeah,
they just said, well, I lost a truck driver, I'll drive the truck. I
yeah.
lost a whatever, I'll do that gig too. And their weekends became shorter and shorter. Their rest periods became shorter. Their sleep became less,
Mhm.
and their health went to shit, and they died. You know,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
there are certainly business owners out there who took on too much and didn't. I mean, that's always been true.
yeah,
You know what? They were like that before. What what I think we have to come to grips with that the pandemic was traumatic. I
yeah,
don't care how well you think you survived it. It had a significant toll, and what I see in the owners that I deal with is a lot of untreated trauma,
yeah,
and particularly in the older generations. The folks under 40 fared a little bit better, a little bit more
yeah.
resilient. The older guys, they don't realize how big a toll it took on them emotionally,
True. Yeah,
how much pain they've been packing down. They've lost a lot of their vim and vigor for the business because they missed the self care.
yeah. Yeah,
And
again, maybe it's different on the concert touring side because I'm actually seeing the problem more so in some of the younger people who didn't necessarily grow up in touring in the grind where,
mm,
you were on the road 11 months out of the year or whatever. It's much more corporate now and people have more normal hours and
yeah,
stuff. But since COVID, they've been worn down to a point. Like I had a call with a guy today who's a fairly successful young production manager who's done some sort of mid-size acts and
mhm.
done really, really well with it. And he's leaving the industry. He's looking to do something entirely different. And he was asking for my help to help him figure out what that next step is and introduce
Hmm.
him to some people and stuff. And I have a lot of those conversations with, whether they're lighting people, sound people,
Right.
production management people, whatever they are.
Right.
The last 2 years has just worn them down.
Yeah, and I wonder about that because I do have clients who are in the concert space and they struggle to find people,
Yeah,
right? Which means that, people are doing stuff more back to back. Their local crews aren't as much help as they were before the pandemic. They can't, you get a 20-man order for stagehands and, 10 show up. So everybody's working
that's a
hard.
problem. Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on there. But what I'm really hearing is somebody who's employing these people is not facing the reality that you can't keep these people in the field and not address these issues.
Right.
So the industry has changed. We need to do something different.
Yeah.
Burning people out, and I manage staff, I manage freelancers, right? The most precious thing you have when you're managing the resources of your company is time. You got to reduce the amount of time equipment is not working, as in out of repair, out of service, and you've got to manage the amount of time your team has downtime.
Yeah.
And if you're not managing downtime and you're not looking at the schedule and being first and foremost aware of the downtime for that person, okay, you're just shooting yourself. You're just creating a problem that you can't
You're saying
fix.
making sure that they take downtime.
Yeah, who's
Yeah.
giving?
No, no.
So
When you're
if if
saying
if
managing
my if
downtime.
my employee if my employee gets to choose when they work,
Yeah.
and their tendency is to work themselves to death, management needs to take notice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
First of all, why would any employee get to self-select how hard or how long they work? What are they
Yeah.
working on?
Yeah.
So are you just taking advantage of somebody and hope they don't die on your show, right? Or are you burning out an asset, right?
Yeah.
So what's the highest and best use of this person? It's not running them into the ground. I mean,
Yeah.
I did horrible corporate touring shows in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
With a 27-hour day,
Yeah. Yeah, where
right? Went off.
you sleep under the front of house console or whatever. You take a
Yeah,
nap.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying, and it's an important thing. And I mean, I think a lot of the older school owners, myself included,
Mm,
tend to forget sometimes that you
right.
do really need to manage that
Well,
and pay very close attention to that because we didn't when we were
and
younger. You know?
and look at how you buy touring. You buy on a weekly rate.
Yeah,
You don't really think that you need to pay more than you did 4 years ago.
yeah,
So what do we short? We short the labor.
yeah, yeah. It's
Touring
true.
companies don't want to, I mean, they want to own all the gear. They're not going to sub-rent gear to send it out on tour. They're going to own all that gear.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden, they're not really making money on labor. They have to put people on the show.
yeah.
So, I mean, we're cutting
Right.
corners at the one place we can't cut corners
No,
because
you're
we
right.
aren't willing to tell the tour manager or the producer saying, I'm sorry, I can't do this for $6,000 a week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even your gear, your gear, if you don't take it out of commission every once in a while and make sure that
Right.
it's cleaned up and fixed up and checked and everything else, it's going to
Yeah.
start failing you too. Let me ask you this. So let's say you have a business owner who's been, sleeping for the last 20 years and he comes to you and goes, Tom, I'm going to reboot my business. What are some of the things that have changed in the industry? Like some of the big things that have changed in the industry from 20 years ago to today?
I love the question. 20 years ago, I started when I was back when I was doing magazine articles when we used to get, paper magazines that would come in the mail and pile
Yeah.
up on your desk. And I was three different trade magazines that I wrote for every single month. And I remember writing this article about scope of work proposals. We're an industry which until really 15 years ago, the norm for 99% of the people in our industry was to write in a line by line equipment list, line by line labor, show the client 24 pages of line items with a price on each one, and maybe a discount somewhere or a few price adjustments,
Yeah.
right? That's how everyone sold. So somebody coming, out of a coma from 20 years ago, when they write a proposal, that's what they're going to do because that's what we all did.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the worst possible way to sell. Now there are channels and stuff where you have to sell that way. If you got a technical buyer in touring, you're damn right somebody's scrutinizing every part and piece that you're
Yeah.
sending. They're commodity buyers, right? But if you have a good tour client, you're going to tell them, I'm going to send everything it takes. It's $8,000 a week.
Yeah.
And they're going to
Yeah.
go, thank God you're available. We want you to have on the show. We can make that number work.
You know what's interesting? I didn't know that that change had taken place because I'm not on that side of the business, of course.
Right.
So, but that's how I've always quoted things because a couple of reasons. You know, one, you make it too easy for them to just take one line out of it and go Google it and get a lower price.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair because, you know, 9 of my other 10 prices might have been lower than the other ones, and you can't
Right.
just pull one line out and go price shop
Right.
it. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. And this
Right.
this show isn't just 10 lines, you know, it's so
No.
many other things.
Well,
So,
and do they know what can be pulled out?
right.
I
Yeah.
remember, back in the day, when we were doing slideshows, we had an item when you're doing multimedia slideshows, you had a computer and you had a data booster, which is basically what we would think of as a DMX splitter, right? And it protected the signal. So and you put it on each end of the snake to get to wherever your control devices were.
Hmm.
And producers look at that, oh, we don't need 2 of those, we just need 1.
Hmm.
Because they want to save $15. And we
Yeah.
started saying, well, this is stupid. That's going to screw everything up,
Yeah.
right? So we just started saying, this is not negotiable. Here's everything it takes to do an 18 projector slideshow,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not 18 projectors and 6 stackers and 18 lenses and 18 mounts and no. Here's everything it takes to do an 18 projector slideshow.
And how did they accept that though? Like what that had to take some time to create that behavioral change in the buyers.
It usually takes one time.
Huh. So you lose that show and they're unhappy
Sometimes,
with it.
often you don't.
Yeah.
Often, what they'll do is they'll piss and moan about it. You'll give them a little break somewhere else that doesn't
Yeah.
matter,
Hmm.
right? You'll throw them a little because you're not changing the price. It's the same price.
Yeah.
You're just taking away all the little things that they can pick at. That
Makes
one
sense.
is not helping anybody's time. And the fact is, I'm going to send it anyway.
Yeah.
So if you were going to send it anyway, why are you even telling the customer you're charging for it?
It's totally true. Yeah,
Just
it's totally
wrap it
true.
into the price. And so we started doing things like, say, when you run a video projector, it includes all the things it takes to make the video projector work,
Hmm.
rather than listing all the things that go with the video projector.
Well, one of the
So
ones I
that's the
used
beginning.
Yeah. One of the ones I used to always remember with automated lights, with moving lights, was especially if you had cameras on a
Mm,
show,
mm,
or it was a video shoot of some sort, a television
mm,
shoot or something.
mm.
They didn't want to pay for new lamps, right? You know,
Right.
no, I want to pay X amount of dollars per light, and I'm going to rent these lights, and I don't want to pay for it.
Mm,
And then they'd
mm,
come and they would complain for days that the color temperature doesn't match perfectly in all of the lamps, you know?
mm.
And, you know, I gave you that option. So now the only thing we can do is filter down to sort of the lowest uh, temperature that works for you
Right.
or whatever. But I mean, it was always this argument over, you know, no, we don't want to pay for new lamps, but yes, we want
Right.
all the lamps to match. Well, how can I do that without putting new lamps in the fixtures,
Right.
sir? You know, I mean, it just
Right.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, people always, lighting is always a hard thing to price, especially in the AV world, because if you're competing with entertainment lighting people, the price points are much, much different.
Yeah.
Right. And you could rent a Source 4 ellipsoidal for $18 a week, but if you go to the AV company, it's $60 a week.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things we used to say, and it doesn't always work, is saying, well, does the company you're running from bench focus it after every job? Well, no. Do
And
they
they
put
go,
new lamps?
what? Bench
What?
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 Yeah.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's a different value proposition. So again,
Hmm.
it's understanding what it is you're doing, where you fit in the marketplace that makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean that quoting thing is interesting because again, I didn't even know that that change happened. It makes a ton of sense. But are there any other major things that you'd tell that freshly awoken business owner? Hey, by the way, this is going to be a lot different now.
I think that's the big thing. The other big thing is that, compared to that era and now, if you own all the equipment and people that you need to do all the jobs that you're going to do, you are not going to make money in this economy.
Really? Huh?
That model does not work. It is not viable because you'll never have the utilization unless you have solved the seasonality problem, which I always ask whenever I stand in front of an audience. I say, guys, quick conversation. You guys all talk to each other. Tell me how you solve seasonality for your business. Go. There's no answer to it.
Yeah.
We're a
Yeah, but
seasonal industry.
so
So
how do
how
you
can you run a business that has overhead that's not being used 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months out of the year just so they can be super busy for the other half of the year?
but how do you outsource that overhead if everybody else is busy too?
Ah, that's not true. We were oversaturated, right? Before the pandemic, everybody had too many employees on staff. There was tons of freelancers out there. Nobody had trouble finding people to staff a show,
Right.
right? Why do you have direct labor on staff? Name a theater company that has full-time technicians.
No, you're right.
Name an act that has full-time technicians.
Yeah, you're right.
Why do we have full-time technicians? It's a gig industry, and
Yeah.
all the best people gig. The best people, there are some fantastic people who are staff, but if you want to know who the best at a job is in any segment, I guarantee you it's a freelancer.
Yeah, you were saying though that it's you can't be profitable if you own all your gear and all your people and stuff, but is that different at scale? In other words, if you're a much larger business with 20 offices and
There's no scale that it works.
okay. Yeah,
Okay.
because you're always going to have seasonality.
You're always going to have to sell. You're always buying equipment and hiring people ahead of demand,
Mhm.
right? If that's your model, you have to hire ahead of demand, then you turn away work,
Mhm.
right? If you can always sell beyond your inside resources and you can always outsource, you can sell as much as you want.
Mm.
And the example I always get, one of my clients that I've had for many years, they had 70 employees pre-pandemic. They did $15 million a year of business. They were not profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, just not profitable, right? Post-pandemic, 2022, they did $18 million worth of business with 30 employees, and they did over 20% net profit.
Hmm.
And the team, no one in sales, no one in operations, no one in finance, broke a sweat. End of the year meeting, how was the year for you? Man, we did a lot of business. Who's burned out? We're not burned out.
Yeah.
They had
That's
not a single
interesting.
technician on staff. They did not buy any new equipment. They subrented whatever they needed to. They hired freelancers. It went from a 50-person freelance pool to a 300-person freelance pool.
Yeah, but so, again, different industries, but comparing that to the concert industry, um 2021, 22, when equipment shortages were such a massive problem and people shortages, the companies who had their own equipment and people were able to charge more, b able to take on more work, c probably more profitable
Sure.
because the people who had to subrent people and gear were overpaying. Oftentimes they were unable to get everything they needed.
I did not see that at all.
No.
No.
Huh.
I mean, you yourself experienced the fact we have a surplus of gear. Everybody's dumping gear on your platform,
Yeah. And
right?
then they weren't. And then there was
But
like,
then they weren't, right?
yeah.
So again, we
Okay.
can't use 21 or 22 as a benchmark.
That's true. Yeah. No, it's
2023
entirely
is our
true.
benchmark.
Yeah.
Okay,
23
2023
was as close to normal as I think.
is our first pretty normal year. We're as
Yeah.
normal as we could be all year. We haven't had any shutdowns. We haven't had any things that's caused people to cancel meetings. It's been fairly normal demand.
But again, if you have a seasonal industry,
Mhm,
and so let's call it corporate meetings,
mhm,
and it's seasonal.
mhm.
If I don't own all my gear or all my people, who am I cross renting from if it's seasonal for them as well and their season matches mine because it's the AV industry? Or am I renting from the rock and roll or theater industry because they're not as busy?
There is always somebody who's not busy that week, but the fact is, you know, we have a wholesale market.
Yeah.
There are plenty of wholesale suppliers out there, particularly on the Pro AV side. There certainly is. I mean, if you look at it, half of PRG's business is being a wholesale supplier
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
to other companies, right? So there are plenty of suppliers out there who are B2B suppliers that we can rent from. In
Yeah.
every local market, there's 5 other companies that do what you do who have parts and pieces available that week, and we trade back and forth just like we did in the 90s
Right.
before VER,
Right.
right? So before there was a wholesale market, we had all these people who did business together. We never had trouble finding gear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of gear out there. You just may need 10 go-to suppliers instead of 2.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. It's you know, those are the most expensive moving parts in these businesses, and
Mhm.
and again, when it's a seasonal business and it's a down season, the last thing you want is a huge warehouse full of inventory and tons of
Mhm.
people that need
Right.
feeding, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like
Right.
you need your expenses to rise and fall with your income,
Right. And that's,
ideally.
that's the plug again for my book Balance, because this operating system, it works the same in concert touring companies, corporate AV companies. I got Broadway clients, right? It's all the same problem.
Yeah.
If we put too much direct labor and direct resources into our resource pool, we have to sell on revenue. We got to sell on price in order to keep it busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a death spiral. And the only way to break the death spiral is to be inherently profitable and outsource whenever you need to, so you don't buy permanent overhead to try and keep up.
Let's get a quick plug on that book. Where can people get it on Amazon, I would assume?
Well, you can certainly get it on Amazon, Balance by Tom Stimson.
Yeah. Can you get it on your website? And
You
I'm
could
sure
drop
you
by my
make more money
website
if it gets it
at,
sold on your
at, at
website.
no, I don't sell it on my website. I want as many people to have it. Amazon's way better at this than I am. But if
Good
you
point.
pop by my website at trstimson.com, shoot me an email, have a chat, something like that,
Yeah.
I'd be happy
Yeah.
to send you a copy.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to grab the book because I love what you're talking about. I like all of this stuff a whole bunch. So going back to our guy that was sleeping for 20 years, let me ask you something. What do you tell him about AI? This poor sap. What are you going to tell this poor sap who probably hasn't even seen an iPhone yet? He may have a
Well,
BlackBerry.
well,
With the black and white
assuming
screen.
actually was in a coma, but
Yeah.
if they were just out of the industry, I'd say AI is just a tool,
Hmm.
right? I'm not sure what in our industry AI replaces, except that I use it.
Yeah.
Okay, every meeting I take with a client or a prospect, my note taker is an AI bot. It's giving me notes and bullet points and reminders and
Likewise. Yeah.
transcripts and everything. It's very intuitive. We're using AI to generate podcast content, to do intros and outros. There's so many things that we could use for AI for in the meetings industry,
Yeah.
right, to make life easier. I'm from the old days when we used to do live walk-ons. You had to have the voice of God mic to walk the executive on, and then we
Yeah.
started like recording it on tape and we're splicing reel to reel. Why not just type the script in and run it through your AI bot? It'll be perfect every time.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the industry, though, is concerned with the fact that, we can't be that far away from lighting consoles that program themselves and audio consoles that read the room and set
Yay.
themselves. And yay. But again, those are jobs that are pretty well paying jobs as
We're
well.
not we're
So,
not getting rid of jobs. You know what? Remember what consoles used to be like?
yeah.
They were so big that you had to lean to both sides to get to the faders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Technology gets easier to apply. It gets easier to engineer. You need to be less of a rocket scientist in order to make it work, which means you get to be more of an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree
So
with you. I
AI,
agree with you.
we
I'm
know that
being devil's
AI
advocate.
AI sucks at art. Okay, there's still going to be an operator there, but God, how many people are using something to ring out the room?
Why do you say AI sucks at art? Because I've seen some
Huh?
pretty incredible AI art.
Is it art or is it
This
media?
is always the question. No, but this is always the question.
Right,
Same with music. Music that's
right,
created by AI. Is that art or is that
yeah,
something else,
right. So
Uh,
it's the self-driving car thing. At what point in time do you not want to be I'm not ready to be in a self-driving car,
yeah.
right? you know, I want an
I don't
operator
know. Have
there
you seen
because
some of
there's
these
that
Uber drivers?
moment. Yeah,
I might
I
take the
know.
car instead of the Uber driver these days, you know?
But there's a point in time we all want to make sure our show goes well, and there are things that are always out of our control.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust me to mute the CEO when they're barfing up a lung on stage or they're going to the bathroom with their mic on
Right.
more than I trust AI to do it.
Yeah. Did you
So
hear
I think there's always
that one live thing that they did on Twitter or whatever, where Vivek Ramaswamy went and took a leak and he had his mic on, and they kept going, Vivek, you got a live mic.
yeah.
Vivek, you got a live mic.
Yeah, there's a piece on Welcome to Wrexham where Ryan Reynolds does that.
I remember that. That is such a
Right? So
great show, by the
yeah,
way. I don't even
yeah,
whoever turned me on to that show,
uh,
thank you, because my girlfriend is British and a huge soccer fan, but
yeah.
I'm Canadian. I don't know
It,
what soccer is,
it's
right?
it's a
So
it's a great show. It's a great show.
really good
Man,
show.
man, it has been great visiting with you. This has been a blast. Thank you.
Super, super cool. No, I mean, I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but I obviously have to be very cognizant of your time.
Uh,
So, your book, Balance, How to Build a Scalable Business with Less Stress and More Profit, get it at Amazon.
mhm.
Um, it- Give me 2 minutes. What is intentional success? I know that you have groups and you have coaching and
So, intentional success, this is really my philosophy. I mean, what are you doing to have success? What are the steps that you're taking? We spend so much time wishing that things were better. What are we actually doing about it?
yeah,
So, most of what we have to do is overcome obstacles in order to be better, and that takes intention.
yeah,
So, we can let business happen to us, or we can take steps to make business work better for us. So, that's what intentional success is all about. There are things that we could all be doing to be better. So,
right.
intentional success clubs are my peer group clubs where we meet monthly, we meet in person, we help each other with their businesses. Of course, I do the intentional success podcast.
So these are
Um,
like CEOs in the AV industry,
yeah,
company
it-
owners.
yeah, these are owner operators for the businesses. I've got a group that has second in commands with them as well. I do management team groups. We do one-on-one coaching. I do
How
business
does that go
assessments
though
and
when
road mapping.
you've got competitive business owners all in this group talking about intentional
Another
success?
thing that that guy from 20 years ago is going to find out that if he's worried about his competitors, he should just go back to sleep.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You are
No,
not wrong.
nobody is your competitor.
Yeah,
Now, what are the odds that two people in my group work across the street from each other and chase the same business? They're not. The fact of the matter is, when you find out that even if you knew everything about your competitor's business, what are you going to do with the information?
that's true. Yeah,
Right?
no, it's
Why
true.
not learn from each other? You support each other. And the fact is, they're not competitors.
It's
They're
one of the
people who are
things.
doing the same thing and need support.
Yeah, the transparency that has become
Mhm.
from social media and stuff. It's one of the things that I really like is we're not hiding all of those secrets
Mhm.
anymore. It's all, blemishes and all are put out there on social media. So,
Yep.
so these groups are meeting how often?
We meet every month.
Okay, so once a month, and they're
Yeah.
all virtual meetings.
Yeah, they're once a month virtual meetings. We do meet in person a couple of times a year, and then all of my club members get one-on-one coaching with me whenever they need it.
And again, if anyone's interested in that, they just go to your website and they can sign
Go to
up
my
to.
website or email me at tom@trstimson.com. Happy to chat with you about it, help you
Amazing.
understand how it works, how it might apply to your business.
Yeah. No, so cool. Again, I've been following you since I think it was Griff Palmer who sent me this
Ah,
article that you wrote about
yeah,
inventory. And he
yeah,
said, Marcel, you got to get to know this guy, smart guy.
right, right.
And I read the article, loved it, shared it a whole bunch, and I've been following you since. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on and look forward to talking to you a whole lot more. We'll bring you back on again when I know more better questions to ask you. And
Well, it's been a treat. I'm happy to do it again, and who knows, we might even have better AV.
yeah, our mics might work. Thanks
Yeah.
again.
All right. Cheers.
All right.